Burkina Faso, Ibrahim Traoré finally gets hold of the rebel leader. Burkina Faso, afei deɛ ɔmo nsa ka otuakyini no a na ɔha wɔn. Now, I've been asking this question and I want to ask again. Why can't they give Burkina Faso rest? Why? Why? And another question is, who are behind this? Who is giving them the weapons? What nation is motivating these wicked people? Why can't they give Africa rest? This is why every black man have to stand with Ibrahim Traoré. Because Ibrahim Traoré is proven beyond doubt. He's a young man who is so committed, is so faithful, so loyal for his country and Africa as a whole. We can't mix this young man. We can't betray this young man. We have to support him with everything, physically, spiritually, and materially. Because Ibrahim Traoré is a star for Africa. And also, Ibrahim Traoré is a gift for Africa. Let's go and watch this video. Please take your time because the video also will take your time. Let's go and watch the video.
نلا كل كذا الحمد لله كل كذا كمان
Burkina Faso did not just arrest a man. They struck at the very spine of a terrorist empire that has haunted the Sahel for decades. The name is Ousmane Diou. To the outside world, perhaps just another shadow. But to those who know the hidden maps of terror, he was the gatekeeper, the quartermaster, the men who made war possible. Weapons, fuel, motorcycles, money, even medical kits for the wounded, he moved it all. When the soldiers of Burkina Faso placed him in chains, they were not capturing a person, they were severing the arteries of JNIM itself. And yet, why is this story not breaking headlines across the world? Why does silence echo in the very halls that once claimed to fight terrorism? There is a secret buried here. A truth that cannot be ignored. Stay with me until the end, because what we uncover is not just about Burkina Faso, it is about the very definition of sovereignty in Africa. If you believe this story deserves to be told, like this video, leave your thoughts, and subscribe so the voice of Africa rising cannot be silenced. According to reports, Ousmane Diou was more than a fixer. He was the brother of Jaafar Diou, the leader of JNIM, the Al-Qaeda branch in the Sahel. His role was not to fire bullets, but to make sure others could. He purchased motorcycles used in raids, supplied fuel for convoys, distributed money to field commanders, and arranged medical kits to keep wounded fighters alive. His arrest, officials say, was a crippling blow, especially given allegations that he coordinated with external networks tied to France and Côte d'Ivoire to destabilize Burkina Faso. But this is only the surface of the iceberg. What lies beneath is darker, deeper, and more dangerous than the headlines suggest. That was only the surface of the iceberg. The real war in Burkina Faso is not measured by the arrest of one man, but by the shadows that move across the Sahel every night. JNIM does not live in caves. It lives in the arteries of the region, in the fuel depots, the black markets, the whispers that buy silence. This is not a war of tanks against tanks, but a war of infiltration. Of deception, of ghosts who strike and vanish before the dust has settled. When the Burkinabe soldiers close their eyes, they know that tomorrow may not bring rest, because the enemy does not fight like soldiers. The enemy fights like a phantom state, weaving webs in the darkness. JNIM has evolved into something more than a band of militants. They have become logisticians of chaos. Motorcycles, not armored vehicles, are their cavalry. Cash, not ideology, buys their recruits. Drones, not rifles, map the terrain for their ambushes. In one village, an elder recalls hearing the buzzing of wings, and thought it was locusts. It was not. It was a drone overhead, guiding an attack that left his field stained with blood. The battlefield has shifted. No longer does war require columns of soldiers marching under flags. It requires technology, secrecy, and the willingness to weaponize civilians as shields. Imagine a convoy of Burkina troops rolling through the Sahel. They do not see the enemy until the first explosion rips the silence. A drone, cheap but deadly, has already given away their position. Minutes later, motorcycles swarm like a living storm. This is how JNIM fights, a choreography of terror, funded by streams of money that do not come from the desert alone. Fuel is bought in Ouagadougou itself. Medical kits are purchased in marketplaces where ordinary citizens shop for bread. Someone inside the capital signs receipts, loads trucks, and delivers supplies, all the while smiling like a neighbor. The conspiracy is not at the border, it is inside the walls. And yet, the suspicion does not stop there. Allegations circulate that foreign powers, with deep pockets and long histories in the Sahel, have interests in keeping the fire burning. The name of France is whispered in hushed tones, accused of financing operations too costly for desert raiders to manage alone. Côte d'Ivoire is pointed at as a safe corridor, a nation that looks the other way as men and weapons cross its soil. Whether these allegations are proven or not, one truth remains: terrorism on this scale cannot survive without oxygen from outside. Someone pays the bills. Someone supplies the parts. Someone writes the script. Burkina Faso bleeds, but the ink is held in other hands. The cruelty of this war is not only in the attacks, but in the theater of perception. When Burkina soldiers liberate a town, the world looks away. When they suffer losses, the headlines scream. Western media, critics say, publish death counts like football scores, but omit the victories that come at enormous sacrifice. Sometimes, worse still, they frame the story as if Burkina troops were the aggressors, as if civilians died by their bullets, erasing the reality that terrorists hide behind women and children. This is not simply a war of bullets and bombs. It is a war of narratives, a struggle for truth in a marketplace of lies. Consider the prison raids, a tactic as shocking as it is deliberate. Militants storm jails not only to free comrades, but to humiliate the state, to show that the bars of Burkina Faso cannot contain their power. Each escape is a message: we decide who walks free. Each raid reinforces the myth that the government is powerless. But these are not myths born of strength, they are myths manufactured through sabotage. Through leaks of intelligence, through insiders who trade loyalty for money. Every time a prison wall falls, a whisper behind the scenes has already unlocked the gate. What makes this conflict unbearable is the cost to ordinary people. Villagers are trapped between fire and smoke. JNIM uses civilians as shields, forcing them to stand in the line of fire. Mothers weep as sons are dragged into the bush, not to be killed, but to be transformed into weapons. Children carry supplies, women are threatened into silence, elders are coerced into providing food. Terrorism here is not an outsider's invasion, it is a parasite feeding on the lifeblood of communities. It survives not only through fear, but through manipulation, offering money to the poor, protection to the desperate, and punishment to the defiant. And still, against this nightmare, Burkina Faso resists. Soldiers march not for paychecks but for survival. Ibrahim Traoré speaks not with the polished language of diplomats, but with the raw urgency of a man whose country is under siege. He has promised that Burkina Faso will become one of the safest nations in Africa, a vow that sounds like madness in the midst of daily attacks, but a vow that rallies hearts. His words are not utopian dreams, they are survival mandates. When you live in a land where children are kidnapped and roads are ambushed, to dream of safety is not naive, it is revolutionary. But revolution requires allies, and here lies the paradox. The West preaches partnership but demands obedience. Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, together as the AES alliance, reject this bargain. They declare that sovereignty is not negotiable, that Africa rising cannot be outsourced. In this declaration, they find both strength and isolation. To some, they are heroes reclaiming dignity. To others, they are rebels against the global order. What is clear is that the battle against terrorism is not just military, it is civilizational. It asks the question, can Africans define their own security? Or must they forever depend on outsiders who play double games? The people of the Sahel already know the answer. They see the funerals, the empty schools, the burned markets. They also see the victories, though too often hidden from global eyes. When a convoy survives an ambush, when a village is reclaimed, when a terrorist cell is dismantled, these are moments of triumph. Yet they are rarely celebrated, rarely broadcast. Why? Because victory in Africa does not sell as easily as tragedy. But here, in this telling, the victories matter. The arrest of Ousmane Diou is not a small detail. It is a symbol that the web can be broken, that the arteries of terror can be cut, that Burkina Faso is not a victim but a fighter. This is why your voice matters. This is why silence cannot be an option. If you are listening to this story and you believe that the courage of Burkina Faso does stand. For them, surrender is not an option. For them, silence is not peace. For them, sovereignty is not a slogan but a shield, hammered in fire, carried with blood. Africa rising is not poetry, it is defiance. And defiance is the one thing that cannot be bought, bribed, or broken. So remember Ousmane Diou, not as a man with a name, but as a symbol of what happens when courage meets conspiracy. When a small nation stares into the abyss and refuses to blink. Remember that this story is bigger than Burkina Faso. It is about Mali. It is about Niger. It is about every nation in Africa that chooses to rise. Even when the weight of the world presses down. And if you believe that rise must not be hidden, then let your voice join theirs. The fight is not over, but neither is the dream. The war in Burkina Faso is not only fought with bullets in the Sahel. It is also fought with words, headlines, and silence. Every battle has two fronts, the battlefield and the narrative. And in the narrative, truth often dies before soldiers do. When a Burkina unit pushes back an ambush, the story rarely travels beyond the dusty roads where it happened. But when a column is hit, when soldiers fall, the news flashes like wildfire. The imbalance is not accidental. It is the architecture of perception, a quiet war that has the power to define winners and losers without ever firing a shot. In Ouagadougou, people whisper that the battlefield extends to Paris, London, and Washington. Not through guns, but through cameras and printing presses. The same institutions that once wrote of civilizing missions now write of instability. The same outlets that broadcast the fall of Kabul broadcast the fragility of the Sahel. The language changes, but the logic remains. It is a narrative that paints Africa as incapable. That paints sovereign leaders as reckless, that turns every step forward into a prelude to collapse. And when the people of Burkina Faso protest, when they reject foreign bases, the narrative twists again. They are radicals, anti-Western, or worse, dangerous nationalists. But ask the mothers in Kaya who bury their sons. Ask the farmers in Dori who walk their fields in fear. Ask the soldiers who march into ambush after ambush, still raising their flag. Are they radicals, or are they survivors? Are they dangerous nationalists, or are they patriots who refuse to kneel? The information war says one thing. The lived reality another. And in between, confusion grows, feeding cynicism, weakening solidarity, isolating a nation that dares to fight on its own terms. History offers warnings. In the United States, during the Vietnam War, soldiers fought in the jungle while another war raged at home, in newspapers, on television, in protest marches. Victories in the field often vanished under headlines of quagmire. A generation of Americans returned home, not to honor, but to suspicion. They were branded as agents of a failed cause, even when many battles had been won. The war was not lost in the rice paddies. It was lost in the perception of a public convinced that victory was impossible. And perception, once cemented, is harder to break than iron. Burkina Faso now walks a similar path. Every ambush is amplified, every loss magnified, while victories dissolve into silence. The psychological weight of this imbalance cannot be overstated. A soldier who fights all day does not only fear bullets. He fears that his sacrifice will be erased, that his courage will never be known. This is how morale is corroded, not only on the battlefield, but in the heart. And this is how nations are weakened. Not by defeat alone, but by the theft of their story. There is another danger. Disinformation flows like poison through veins already cut by conflict. Fake videos, doctored photographs, inflated casualty numbers, all are tools in the arsenal of psychological warfare. Terrorist groups themselves understand this better than anyone. They film their raids, edit their footage, upload their victories, and spread them across platforms. They understand that one dramatic clip can terrify more than 100 bullets. They understand that images live longer than battles. And too often, foreign outlets echo these images, amplifying the enemy's narrative while silencing the state's. What does it mean when the people who fight to defend their land are seen abroad as aggressors? What does it mean when foreign experts describe Burkina Faso as a failing state, even as its soldiers reclaim territory mile by mile? It means the war is being stolen. Not the land, but the meaning. And in war, meaning is as powerful as ammunition. This is why Traoré speaks so forcefully. Not only about sovereignty of territory, but sovereignty of story. He has accused foreign media of bias, of distortion, of omission. His words echo a frustration that is not only his own, but the frustration of an entire generation. A generation that wants their victories recorded, their sacrifices honored, their identity defined by themselves, not by outsiders. A generation that refuses to let its struggle be framed as futility. But here lies the paradox. In the age of information, silence can be as deadly as a bomb. When the victories of Burkina Faso go unreported, the silence itself becomes propaganda. It whispers that nothing is achieved, that resistance is pointless, that surrender is inevitable. And yet the reality on the ground contradicts this. Villages are retaken. Networks are disrupted. Leaders of terror are captured. The silence is not an accident, it is a weapon. To understand the cruelty of this, imagine the American soldier in Vietnam who holds a hill for weeks, only to return home and be told his war is a disgrace. Now imagine the Burkinabe soldier who reclaims a village from JNIM, only to see foreign headlines describing his country as collapsing. Or worse, accusing him of killing civilians used as shields by terrorists. In both cases, the blade cuts deep, deeper than wounds of flesh. It cuts into identity, into the meaning of sacrifice. The information war is not separate from the battlefield, it is the battlefield. And winning it requires more than bullets. It requires narrative courage. It requires voices that refuse to be silenced. It requires allies who will not allow Africa's story to be written by those who never bleed for it. This is why the AES alliance matters. Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso, they do not only share intelligence and weapons. They share a struggle to reclaim the pen that writes their destiny. It is easy to underestimate this. Outsiders often see only the guns, the explosions, the instability. They miss the deeper layer, that Africa is learning to narrate itself. That every speech Traoré gives, every declaration of Goïta, every vow from Niger's leaders, is not only a military position, but a narrative act. They are rewriting the story from fragile states to sovereign states. They are shifting the frame from dependency to defiance. And while this may not appear on the front page in Paris, it echoes across villages, rallies, and classrooms in the Sahel. There is danger here, of course. Narrative power invites narrative backlash. Just as in Vietnam, where anti-war protests clashed with patriotic resolve, Burkina Faso faces divisions of its own. Some doubt, some fear, some despair. Terrorists feed these doubts. Foreign powers exploit them. But the resistance continues, because the alternative is unthinkable: surrender not only of land, but of dignity. For those listening now, ask yourself, what does sovereignty mean if a nation cannot even tell its own story? What is victory worth if the world insists on calling it defeat? What is freedom worth if silence buries it alive? These are not questions for Burkina Faso alone. They are questions for all nations that dare to rise. And they are questions for you, the listener, the witness. Because the war of narratives is not won by governments alone. It is won by communities, by voices, by those who refuse to repeat the lies handed to them. If you believe that the courage of these soldiers deserves more than silence, if you believe their victories must not be erased, then let this be your moment. Comment below. Share your voice. Add your perspective to the chorus that says, Africa Rising is not a slogan, it is a reality. And no amount of distortion, no avalanche of misinformation, can bury a truth carried by millions. Sometimes the smallest act, refusing to be silent, becomes the loudest weapon of all. Strategy is not made in air-conditioned conference rooms. In the Sahel, strategy is forged in the dust, in the heat, in the knowledge that one mistake can cost a village its life. For Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, the AES alliance, the war is no longer about chasing shadows. It is about shaping the battlefield itself. When the enemy hides, they will flush them out. When the enemy runs, they will cut the escape. When the enemy survives on fuel, money, and rumor, they will sever every vein that carries those lifelines. This is not theory. This is survival. Ibrahim Traoré has said it plainly, Burkina Faso will become one of the safest nations in Africa. To some, those words sound like impossible bravado, the speech of a young leader who has not yet felt the full weight of despair. But to his soldiers, to his people, those words are oxygen. They are not empty. They are a vow that transforms fear into resolve. Every patrol that moves through the Sahel carries not only rifles but the weight of that promise. If the vow fails, the nation fails. If the vow holds, then sovereignty is no longer a dream, it is reality. What does it mean to fight differently? For AES, it means moving the war to places where terrorists least expect it. It means relocating conflict zones, refusing to be reactive, refusing to wait for the next ambush. Instead, AES armies push outward, surrounding safe havens, cutting off supplies before they reach the field. It means taking the initiative back, seizing the tempo. Terrorists have lived too long on surprise, now it is they who must fear the unknown. The hunters are hunted, the raiders raided. This inversion is the essence of AES strategy. Do not let the enemy decide where and when the war is fought. The tactics are brutal but necessary. Fuel depots suspected of feeding JNIM convoys are burned to ash. Smuggling routes that once carried cash and weapons are blocked, guarded, mined. Informants inside Ouagadougou are exposed and paraded, a signal that betrayal has a price. Even the air itself is contested. Drones once used by terrorists are now mirrored by AES forces, who launch their own eyes in the sky. The desert is no longer one-sided. It is becoming contested ground. Slowly, painfully, the balance shifts. This struggle has parallels. In American history, farmers once defended their fields against raiders, building militias in the Revolutionary War. Choosing to fight on their terms, not the enemy's. In Iraq and Afghanistan, U.S. soldiers learned the bitter lesson that controlling terrain means nothing if you cannot control the narrative. The supply lines, the will of the people. AES is learning the same, but they are applying it with a clarity born of desperation. For them, there is no fallback base in another continent. There is no overseas sanctuary. Victory or death is not a metaphor, it is geography. Midway through this battle, a question emerges: who tells the story? If you believe, even for a moment, that the sacrifices of AES soldiers matter, then your voice is part of this war. Every comment, every share, every word spoken in defense of their courage is a weapon against silence. So pause for one moment. If you stand with the right of Africa to fight its own battles, write it below. Let them know they are not alone. Because in a world where propaganda is louder than truth, your voice can tip the scales. The pressure on AES is immense. Terrorists adapt, striking softer targets, using civilians as cover, sowing fear in marketplaces. But AES adapts too. Joint patrols move across borders with seamless coordination, something that once seemed impossible. Where once Mali fought alone, now Burkina reinforcements arrive. Where Niger was cornered, Malian units flank. The message is unmistakable: the borders drawn by colonial pens will not divide their security. What was once three vulnerable states is becoming a single wall. But walls are not enough. AES leaders know that cutting supply lines is only half the battle. The other half is political. They must convince their people that the struggle is worth enduring. Even when the nights are filled with gunfire. They must build faith that the state can protect, even when villages are burned. This is the true genius of Traoré's vow. It is not only a statement of future safety. It is a rallying cry that says, "We will not abandon you." For a farmer in Kédougou, for a mother in Djibo, those words are as powerful as bullets. Still, doubt persists. International critics mock the AES, calling them isolationists, rebels against global norms. They warn that without Western backing, the fight is doomed. But those same critics ignore the evidence. Each month, AES forces claim victories, disrupt convoys, capture leaders. Each month, they stand taller, even as casualties mount. It is not perfection, but it is progress. And in war, progress is survival. The war is reshaping the identity of these nations. Once seen as weak links in global security, they are now laboratories of resistance. Their youth do not dream of exile, they dream of defense. Their songs are not of escape, but of sovereignty. The Sahel, once spoken of as a burden, is becoming a crucible. And crucibles do not destroy, they refine. They burn away illusion until only steel remains. What remains is hard, unyielding, defiant. It is the image of a soldier standing on the back of a pickup truck, rifle raised, eyes unbroken. It is the sound of a president declaring safety in the midst of chaos, daring the world to call him a fool. It is the image of children in a village, waving at convoys, not because they are safe yet, but because they believe safety is coming. These images matter. They are proof that AES strategy is not only about killing terrorists, it is about giving people back their belief in tomorrow. There will be setbacks. There will be ambushes that succeed, raids that break through, propaganda that bites. But if the strategy holds, if lifelines are cut, if safe havens are destroyed, if the will of the people is sustained, then the raw defiance of a people who refuse to disappear. The deeper truth is this: terrorism in the Sahel is not only the act of men in the desert. It is also the tool of powers far beyond. This is the twist no one wants to say aloud, but everyone senses. Militants do not buy drones with coins from villages. They do not smuggle fuel without corridors left deliberately open. They do not sustain war for years without invisible hands feeding the fire. Behind the chaos, there are boardrooms, embassies, and polished suits that benefit from the disorder of Africa. The enemy is not only on the battlefield. The enemy sits at the negotiating table, smiling, shaking hands, drafting communiques that speak of stability while secretly ensuring the opposite. This is the cruel paradox. The same nations that lecture Africa about peace are accused of arming the shadows that kill its children. The same capitals that condemn terrorism in speeches are whispered to be financiers of the very groups they claim to fight. The proof may be buried, the links may be deniable, but the patterns are visible. Every time Burkina Faso inches closer to sovereignty, the violence spikes. Every time AES speaks of unity, the desert burns hotter. Coincidence is the story told to the naive. Strategy is the truth understood by the awake. The twist is not just betrayal. It is design. Terror is a currency. It buys influence, secures contracts, justifies bases, forces compliance. To destabilize is to control. And in this logic, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger are not just battlefields, they are bargaining chips on the chessboard of global powers. JNIM and ISSP are pawns. Expendable, replaceable. The real game is between capitals thousands of miles away. And the people of the Sahel are caught in the crossfire of a war that is not fully theirs. Yet the twist cuts deeper still. The realization is dawning across Africa that the war against terror is also a war against dependency. If outsiders can switch the flames on and off, then true freedom demands extinguishing not only the militants but the machinery that feeds them. This is why the AES alliance exists, not only to fight terrorists, but to refuse the manipulation of those who claim to help while profiting from harm. It is not merely a military alliance. It is a declaration that Africa will no longer accept security as a leash. The danger of speaking this truth is immense. Leaders who dare to voice it are branded radicals, ostracized, threatened. But silence is worse. Silence is surrender. Traoré, Goïta, and their allies have chosen the harder path, to name the enemy not only in the bush, but in the halls of global power. And in doing so, they transform the war from local struggle to continental awakening. The twist reveals the stakes. This is not simply about defeating JNIM. It is about proving that Africa cannot be managed through perpetual crisis. The story does not end with despair. It ends with defiance. Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger are not bending, not retreating, not waiting for permission to rise. They march, bruised but unbroken, into a future that is theirs alone. The arrest of Ousmane Diou, the vows of Traoré, the solidarity of AES, these are not fragments of chance. They are chapters of a larger destiny. Africa Rising is not a dream whispered in conferences, it is a reality written in the blood and courage of those who fight. But their fight is not theirs alone. It belongs to all who believe sovereignty is sacred. All who believe freedom is worth the price, all who refuse to let lies bury truth. If the courage of Burkina Faso has touched you, do not let it fade. Like this video, comment your thoughts. Subscribe, and share. Let the world know that Africa's story will not be...
Brofokasa no kan wachi kwachiri ntimi nso me mfa omre pi na nsema okan wo mu a ehia pa ni say now these rebellions cannot defeat Burkina Faso without those who are supporting them. And who are those people? Who are those who keep giving them money, giving them weapons? Who are those people who's not willing for Africa to arise? They are the common enemies. And he for the more akudie, he for the more munuani die, sa friendly for, and he for the more sika. Na omu nyej mebia so mugu esen so. Na okasen bi say they are not fighting like soldiers. But they find their way into your mix. Say omu kunti sa asra for say etuo no nti say bia krobi ba ko no mo say ho nyina. Aden na wobo Ibrahim Traoré abaso say me a omo ye nyina no abrantie ni nsuro eno no so abo moje nyema nam wiemu nyema nam wiemu timi nkan brofo si nyema nam wiemu papa nti ba bia omo abon wo bia na strong wo bia no entempa no ni achi wo. Now, how can a man who is surrounded with this enemy, a man who cannot sleep, I don't think Ibrahim Traoré will have a sound sleep. And this man will come out every week, every month with a new thing. Sir Ibrahim Traoré ewo sankrofo atwa ne ho ahia ya omomane nai. Na say abrantie we na watwe bia bosumi bia wode bibi fufuro ba abontin na say wo tuati ni bia hurahura na ontumi nya hwe a na so hu anwanwa woni sa na so hu anwanwa adafo emfoni a wo hwe ya ye mekwa ma ye tintin ni ampese eka akoma se bibini se obo mpaye ma Ibrahim Traoré. Now my reason for watching such a long, it's almost about 30 minutes, is that you have seen the enemies. So it is time for you as a black man to stand and fight against the common enemy. You may not have weapon. You are not a soldier. But what I want you to do is pray for Ibrahim Traoré. He needs your prayers. Pray for him. If Ibrahim Traoré succeed, it's Africa. And Africa will succeed. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.